also like to start today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we all met today. For me, it's the Gidjigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I recognise that it has been and always will be Aboriginal land. So welcome everyone to our learning session today. Some of you might know and be involved in our NACAP expansion projects. And so we thought this would be a great opportunity to have Alison Salmon, who's our external consultant for those monitoring and evaluation frameworks that we're building for those programs, come along and share her wisdom. Alison has had 25 years in public health as a researcher, evaluator and practitioner, and has also worked in senior leadership in the health sector, most recently working with the COVID response branch of New South Wales Health, the Black Dog Institute and Uniting. So as I mentioned, Alison's been leading our work, building our evaluation frameworks, and we thought it'd be a great opportunity for people involved in those projects and also some of our other staff just to learn about how we go about building those evaluations.
How are you?
So with that, I will pass on to Alison to steer us through the session. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you everyone. And what a fantastic group. I'm watching everyone pop in. It's absolutely fantastic to see such a great response and to all be together. And I did call this lunch and learn, but obviously not everyone eats lunch as early as I do. But please feel free to drink cups of tea and eat sandwiches, whatever you need to do as we go along. And I'm just going to share my screen. And I'll just make sure I'm in presentation view.
Yep.
There we go, fantastic, wonderful. Great, thanks. Okay, good. So I've lost your faces, so I apologise. I'm just trying to work out, Karen, if we're able to see. Oh no, I've found you again. That's all fine. I understand we don't have chat turned on for this meeting because we're recording it. But if you do have questions as we go along, I will be pausing for questions, but I will also keep an eye on hands going up. So please feel free to do either or both, and we will see how we go with sort of collating questions as well. This will be recorded, so I'll try and think of ways to integrate any questions we miss into the recorded version as well. All right. Welcome everyone who's still coming in. Right. So and Karen has already acknowledged country, but I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we're all meeting today and pay respects to elders past and present. And I'm actually on Gadigal land as we speak today. So I'm just getting my tech up. Right. So, and Karen's provided a little bit of the context of why I'm talking to you today, but I just did want to raise that, as Karen mentioned, I'm supporting the development of those monitoring and evaluation frameworks for 4 NACAP projects. And while I've been working on that with Karen and Rianne and Hazel and Hannah and Kat, and hi everybody who I know on the call, we realised that a sort of short overview of the value of evaluation as well as the process of developing logic models would be useful for those both involved in those 4 projects and beyond. So developing logic models and evaluation frameworks is very much a team effort, and that's why we're very keen to make sure that this session takes us on a journey and gives you the context of what we're trying to achieve with this approach for the expansion projects within NACAP. So welcome. Now, and just before I get onto the agenda for our time together, I just want to acknowledge that some of the content that I'm presenting today, I've developed in consultation with others, and that includes Dr. Devon Ingdig, which some of you may know, George from UTS, my colleague Debbie Jameson, and I'm also going to be presenting some examples from a work that I've done with the Enabler Project and the Social Impact Hub. And no problem for those who are joining late, don't worry about that. Oh, and I think our chat's working. So again, if you do have any questions, feel free to pop those into the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on that as well. Okay, so our agenda for today is a top-line overview of why we're evaluating. Why do we need to evaluate? What is a logic model? What's the role of a project problem statement and theory in developing a logic model? Some steps towards developing logic models and questions throughout. And if we have time, I'm keen to define impact as well with you, but I'll just keep an eye on the time and see how we go with that. So let's start by thinking about why we need to monitor or evaluate the work that we do. I really like this quote on the top right there that notes that the value of an evaluation is really that it's a systematic and objective process to make judgments about the worth of programs, and it's usually in relation to the project or the program's effectiveness, efficiency, and appropriateness. So really, we evaluate so that we can identify the bits or the elements that are working and what's not working. And we also evaluate to understand how we can make improvements. And importantly, and this is very relevant to the work that I'm doing to support the NACAP expansion project, we need to evaluate to help produce evidence for execs and funders to help decide on the future of programs as well. And I'll use the terms programs and projects interchangeably today, so I hope that's okay with you guys. So what can be evaluated? Today we're going to focus on program and project evaluation, but the principles of good evaluation can be applied to evaluating strategies, and I kind of think of that as a collection of programs or projects. And then we can also obviously evaluate public engagement work or communication strategies, but today we're very much in the program and project section. And if we just want to pause and think about when should we be thinking about evaluation and when we need to evaluate, there are many points within the cycle of program development and implementation that we can evaluate, but the gold standard would be that after a problem is identified and an approach is settled on, and the program becomes designed, then we need to start to insert the evaluation planning phases. So, and that's where we're at in terms of the NACAP expansion projects. That's sort of the stage that we're at the moment. And the first step after planning is then doing some baseline data collection. And this collection can happen in a range of different formats. And it can be, data that's already collected through minimum data sets, which I know you're all across, or it can be new baseline surveys or something similar. And then once the program starts and is actually being delivered, there's a chance for the evaluation data and findings to then inform how the work is being done, and then at the end, how to show value and success. So again, this is sort of the gold standard approach. We all know things happen outside of that cycle sometimes, but this is the gold standard approach. And luckily, I think with our NACAP work, the NACAP expansion project work, we're really very much following this model, which is a delight. And I always like to pause and just think about what makes good evaluation. And there's lots of ways to describe it, but I like to consider these 9 principles as key. So firstly, that the evaluation is integrated or built into the program design. So we've already talked about doing that early. Secondly, that there's been close considerations of the methodologies that are needed and that some good sound ideas have been landed upon. Thirdly, and this is an important one, that there's money and time to do the evaluation and that the findings can be delivered in time for decision making. And I think that's sometimes a tricky one it sounds like an obvious one, but sometimes that can be tricky to make sure the evaluation findings are there and ready to be digested in time for decision making. Fourth, we need to have a good mix of people involved, including making sure that program managers and project staff are included from the beginning. And again, that's why we're doing this work with you guys and why we're having some early workshopping with the NACAP project expansion project staff as well. Fifth, we need good governance processes in place for there to be good evaluation. And for example, with the work we're doing, we've got an internal working party with broad membership that includes some CEOs from the SDOs as well. 6, we have to consider ethical issues and the implications that that has in terms of the evaluation and the data that we're collecting in particularly. And this doesn't mean we need to do full ethics applications that you would do for, university level kind of research projects, but there has to be some thought and consideration to the ethical issues. And this is particularly important considering your target population and the vulnerable groups that OPAN has contact with. 7, and I'm sure all of you will agree with number 7, that we really just need to make sure that we're engaging with relevant stakeholders at all points in the evaluation phasing. And 8, that there's good presentation of data and findings, and that this is essential. So we're a long way from findings for any of the projects that I'm supporting, but we're already starting to think about how best to present that work. I'll just let Rebecca in, Karen as well. Oops. Sorry, just a few people popping in as we go. Welcome, everybody.
I'll admit them.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. And then finally, and where possible, it's really important to share the findings of evaluations broadly. There's often constraints around what we can and can't share, but that's again, something to aim for. Okay. And I just want to quickly pause here because I'm often asked at this point, what's the difference between research and evaluation? And so just to clarify, research is where the purpose of the research piece is to test theories and come up with very sort of generalizable findings, whereas evaluations are very much focused on the effectiveness of a specific program or model of service delivery or etc. Research questions often start with the researchers themselves, sort of considering gaps in knowledge or considering, things that they've identified that they want to play around with, whereas evaluation questions are very much driven by the project or the program team themselves. And research findings are often presented usually in journals or sort of peer review publications, whereas evaluation findings are usually, as we've talked about, presented to execs, funders, project staffs, and then clients themselves. And where research findings need to contribute to sort of broad knowledge on a subject, evaluation findings need to be able to influence the effectiveness and provide insights to that project or program itself. And if I've missed your hand going up, please do let me know. So just to recap, what is good evaluation? It's based on sound judgments, transparent processes, strong evidence, purposeful. They have to be purposeful and designed for use, and they have to be planned and integrated. So to do good evaluation, we need a good framework, and within that framework, we need a good logic model. So I'm just popping that up there to show you all the elements of a good evaluation framework and then where a logic model would actually fit within that framework. So what is a logic model? And a logic model is really, it's a way of presenting, often just on one page, all the resources and activities that make up a program or a project, and also the changes that are expected to result from them. So what we're really doing is visually representing the relationships between the inputs, the activities, the resources, and then what's actually expected to be coming outputs or effects. And I should probably mention, there's lots of different words used for these models. Sometimes you'll see them called program theories or program logics, and you might, if there's other ones that you think you can pop them in the chat if you've heard these kind of models referred to as in other labels as well. So the purpose of a logic model is very much a way to show how the program will work, draw out the relationships between the resources and the activities and the outcomes. And it can be used, as I've said, as a way of planning programs, but as well as evaluating them. And we like to think of them as living documents, as ones that we can come back to and review regularly. And make sure they still are accurately representing a program or a project if it evolves as things progress. So if we pause and, excuse my head moving around, I'm looking at my other screen. If we pause and look at the one on the screen, what it presents left to right is a short understanding of the purpose of the project, the planned work, that's the work that's planned, sorry, and then any intended results. So for example, the project is defined as the what was the project developed for and what was it funded for. The inputs are the resources. So what will be key for the project to be delivered successfully? The activities are really the key delivery elements of the project. And then the outputs are ways of, if these outputs are written down and we go back, this is a way of articulating how we will know that the project was delivered. And then we start to think about results. So short-term outcomes are, as I said, are the short-term successes. The medium-term outcomes are ways that we can judge if we've been successful and if the objectives have been met. And then the long-term outcomes are often linked to the broader context, the downstream outcomes. And the project itself may not directly contribute to these outcomes, but they are a part of achieving a wider impact. And I'll give you some examples. This will sort of come together, I hope, when I show you some examples. So this one will probably be a little bit more familiar. So this is the logic model that Deloitte, which is a large consulting group, has done recently for the NACAP demand study. So, and they've conceived of the inputs, the activities, the outcomes, the inputs, activities, outcomes, impacts, and, sorry, I'm going to pause. So they've gone from left to right, objectives. So for example, one of the objectives they're listing is to inform older people of their aged care rights. There's a list of 4 there. They've articulated inputs and they've talked about personnel, they've talked about principles, they've talked about partnerships as inputs, technology, the actual funding, your NACAP framework, and the legislation and safety standards. So this is a very high level logic model, and I'll also show you some much more granular project and program level logic models as well, but I just wanted you to see something that was familiar. If we follow through, let's just look at the activities that they've identified in the middle there, the upskilling of advocacy staff and the diversity education for aged care providers and advocates. So if that's their activities, the outputs that they're expecting from those activities are skilled advocacy staff, increase numbers of service providers who are completing some digital training, and services delivered in the special needs category. So that's sort of their outputs. And then in terms of short term, or what they're calling intermediate impacts, they're calling out a greater ability of aged care staff to identify and manage families with complex needs, and then improvements in aged care advocacy delivery across the sector. And then in terms of outcomes, they're trying to think high level and then trying to think about things like more targeted and appropriate care to older people, and perhaps services delivered in line with aged care quality standards. So that's a very high level logic model. And again, please call out if you have any questions or thoughts on that. But I just wanted to show you some steps to getting to a logic model, and then I'll show you some more granular level logic models as well. So some important steps for getting there are establishing a problem statement, establishing or identifying a theory that underpins the project or the program, and then drafting up your pipeline sort of logic models. So to identify a problem statement, and this is what I'll be working with a lot of the teams that are working on the 4 expansion projects. I'll be working with them to refine problem statements at the front end of our workshops over the next few weeks. So a problem statement is really where we can identify the issue or the problem that the program will address. And that sounds pretty straightforward, but as you start to dig down, it's actually a very dynamic conversation to get to a really well-formed problem statement. They need to be targeted and specific, and they need to be something that can be solved by the goal of your program or project. So things that we've been considering when we're putting together some draft problem statements for our NACAP projects are what is the problem, what causes it, what are the causes of the causes, who's actually impacted by the problem, who's involved, who else is working on it, who else cares if it's solved, what do we know from the research and the evidence and our own experiences, and what do we know about the way the target group actually experiences this issue. All of these questions will help us refine our problem statement. And so a problem statement is then, as I've said, defined as something that your program can solve, and it sits between the causes, what causes the problem, and what's the consequence of the problems that are identified. Sorry, my little trees are popping up. So, sorry. So I'll give you an example. So a project, oh, sorry, I'll just go back. A project that I've been working on is with the Enabler Group, which is a startup company that's working in the disability and aged care sector. And what a problem that they've identified that they really want to try and have an impact on, and this took quite a while for us to refine this statement, is that much of the training currently available to the Australian disability and aged care sectors fails to address complex sector challenges, contributing to a workforce skills deficit where the rights, independence and well-being of people with disabilities and older people are not adequately supported. So that took about, in terms of hours of work to refine that and to really pin down what the enabler goal was and what their problem was. That took many hours of refinement to get us to that statement. But once we were there, we were then able to move forward with our logic model development and also with the next thing, which was their solution statement. So working out of that problem statement, we were then able to set up our solution, and they were able to articulate what Enabler is trying to do, which is to offer gamified digital skill-based training and assessment modules that use lifelike scenarios based on actual client experiences and delivered with a format that can reach large and diverse cohorts of learners. So that's what we're aiming to get to with each of our NACAP expansion projects also. I'm just going to pause and check that there's no questions. Okay. So for the work that Deloitte has done for the NACAP advocacy program as a whole, this was the project. This was a problem statement that that they came up with. So that the problem being that people in the aged care system or people who may enter the aged care system find it difficult to exercise their rights. So that was the one that has come out of the Deloitte work as well. Okay, so the next step after we have our problem statement, the next step is to identify a good solid theory or evidence base for our program or project. So a good logic model is supported by a good solid theory or evidence base, and that will explain why or how we can see the change we want. So after we implement the program, so it helps clearly state how we think our program is actually going to work. So it can illustrate the relationship between the actions and the outcomes to get to our desired change. And I'll just give you some examples. That's probably so. And I won't go into detail on what theories we would be interested in, but this is just some examples. So we might be interested in thinking about changing people's behaviour based on an understanding of a theory of sustained behaviour change. So, this theory has 6 stages to it, and it identifies a behaviour baseline, it gives targeted training, it has an observation period, it's driving continuous improvement, and it's deconstructing steps. So that's that theory as an example. Another one that that programs might want to increase motivation of people that they're working with, and they might be basing the work on self-determination theory. So they might be thinking about the theory that motivation is influenced by autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and in understanding that will help shape the program that they deliver. And another theory that everyone might be more familiar with is the stage of change theory for behaviour change, for individual behaviour change. That's just some examples. And then once we've got those two things, the problem statement and the theoretical framework set up, then we can start to think about our logic model. So this is just another way to show what I've shown you a little earlier around our inputs, our resources, our activities, our actions, our outputs, what's going to be produced or delivered, and our outcomes, which can be short, medium-term outcomes, and then our long-term impact, our longer-term outcomes that might result from the program. And I just wanted to pause and just check if there were any questions. Okay, and then I just wanted to just reiterate why we do this. So we do it to support design and planning. It can also support program management, obviously our evaluation, and also for monitoring purposes. And I know this can be a little bit overwhelming, so I just wanted to just show another example, a very simple one. So this one we can use, and this one comes from a social impact hub example that I've been working on. Inputs can be considered as what we're investing in the project. The activities can be considered as what we do and to whom. Outputs can be considered as what the program produces. Outcomes are the changes that will occur from the program, and also impacts can be the longer term change. I know I'm saying these all in multiple different ways, but I know that people can have heard about these in different formats as well. So for this particular project, which is called Green Fox, the inputs were financial capital, human capital, and intellectual capital. The activities were training for people who'd just come out of prison. What the program was producing were graduated trainees each year with up to 200 hours of training. The outcomes were improved skills for those trainees, increased employability, and reductions in recidivism for those coming out of prison. And the longer term impacts that they were trying to influence were breaking the cycle of social disadvantage so that imprisonment doesn't mean a life sentence. I'll just pause. Okay, good. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to go. Apologies. Oh. Sorry, I'll just go to this, and now this is a much busier example of a logic model. And this comes from the Bread and Butter project. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. It's another project that the Social Impact Hub work on. And again, I know it's very busy, so we'll break it down. So this logic model also identifies stakeholders, which I think is really useful to do as part of the input section as well. They identify their activities, their outputs, their short-term outcomes, their medium-term outcomes, their long-term outcomes, and then their ultimate goals. So what I thought we might do is start with looking at what their ultimate goals were, or their impact goals, which was they were keen to break cycles of disadvantage to enable positive futures, and they were also interested in using markets to create a more inclusive world for refugees. So if we work back from that, so that's their ultimate impact on a societal level. If we work back from that, their long-term outcomes from the work that they were doing was that they were measuring and interested in influencing generational change with career and employment opportunities for refugees. They were interested in ending trauma, intergenerational trauma. They were interested in positively influencing parents' outcomes when they were working with families, and they were interested in the movement of conscious consumers and procurers, and a very high level one was also seeing Australia as a less racist society. So if we jump across to the kind of activities that they then designed to try to achieve that, they were looking at recruiting trainees and moving them towards qualifications, looking at work placements, enterprises and employment opportunities. If those activities were delivered, they were keen to see that they would land trained bakers, graduates who were ready to work, and people with work placements completed and employment secured. So that was what they were trying to see as their outputs. Short-term outcomes were that they were measuring graduates who were employed, refugees who no longer relied on income support. And you can understand this is then what you were able to measure. So your outcomes, short-term outcomes, are things that you're able to measure as evidence that your activities and outputs were achieved. Increased dignity in financial security and people having pride and self-confidence. At a medium-term level, they were going to measure improved quality of life for the refugees and broadly to the families. They were trying to measure how well refugees were recognised as valuable contributors to society. You can imagine that's quite a complex thing to measure. They were looking at measuring equal access to training and employment, as well as housing and education. So I won't go into all of them. I just wanted to take you on that journey there. And before we go off this slide, I just wanted to identify the stakeholders because I think stakeholders are really important to each of the projects that we're working on together as well. So stakeholders in this context included the trainees, volunteers, employees, those working in the social enterprises, the actual consumers and customers, government donors, and then the support advocacy and support community. So I will stop there and just have a sip of water, but also give you a chance to ask any questions, because I know that's a very busy slide, and see if there's anything that you'd like to explore further. Oh, Craig. Hi, Craig.
Hi. So when you get to these, this is what your outcomes. I'm assuming then you need measures and other things that come under these things as well. And there's something in there about whether they're smart measurements or whether they are even possible to measure. So these are our desired outcomes, whether just so we don't scare that we're going to have measures on every single thing. There would be some prioritization, I imagine, or what's achievable.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really good point. So the process of putting these logic models together is then to sort of interrogate, if we were attempting to improve the life of families of refugees, what would we need to do? We have a way of measuring that? Is that going to be something that we need to move to an ultimate goal, because that's something that's probably outside the remit of the activities that we're doing? Or do we need to find a way to measure that, or design a way to measure that, or think about that? Or if we're not actually able to do that, do we need to change the design of the program or the focus of the program even? So it's a very reflective process. And I think you're absolutely right. Once we have this pinned down, then we start to ask ourselves very hard questions about how do we measure it, and is it able to be shown to be successful? Yeah. Can you think of some examples of things that we've thought we might be able to achieve across OPAM projects that are very, very difficult to measure, for example, Craig?
And I'll throw to sort of some of the other people in the team to talk about as well. But it's interesting that what every advocate does brings forward knowledge to the system as well about what the issues are that older people are experiencing, where their rights are being breached or impacted, but sometimes that hooking it as a causal link and to say we did this and therefore system change happened, or how we use this information is an interesting one. But it all, I suppose, contributes. I think there is the challenges in linking some of this, but I think they're starting to get this sophistication and thinking through what we do. We will start to see the logic connections for the impact of our work as well.
Agreed, and I think that's right. So, sorry, I'll let others jump in before I. because often it's very hard to measure success of advocacy. Advocacy is it's a known challenging area to measure and quantify. So that's why I think having granular logic models at the project level is really important, I think, for the NACAP work and for OPAN more generally, because it is about trying to find those things that are measurable for each project and considering the activities of the project. And Catherine, I'll let you go.
Yeah, I just want to say one of the tricky situations in outcome measurements and impact in advocacy is that often, you know, you work as hard as you can to try and resolve an issue, but there is no resolution, but, you know, still measure the success of a successful advocacy engagement. So, you know, it's not a yes, we were able to resolve as a tick. It's a lot more complex than that. And so therefore measures really need to be quite nuanced, because you can have a very good advocacy engagement and the client, you know, supported as much as possible to create change, but change doesn't always happen.
And sometimes the changes, sorry, Craig, you go.
Saying, but at the same time, that interaction is still valuable for that older person, and the value of what the advocate has done is still really important. So it's sort of balancing that of where we can get to on it. Yeah.
And I've got Hannah and Anna as well. And I just wanted to say, and often the tricky thing for your work, Catherine, is where something doesn't exist is the measure, the good outcome. So having nothing to measure is sometimes the right outcome from a project or an intervention or an advocacy action, isn't it? So yeah. Sorry, Hannah, I'll go to you, and then Anna, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's also, I think, indeed in this work, especially with systemic advocacy, the attribution effect, and, you know, trying to see if it's because of our contribution or what other kind of, you know, things have happened that may have caused some of the changes as well, which makes it, I think, tricky sometimes, but very interesting to kind of look at maybe the broader context in which change happens as well, and trying to see if, you know, what our contribution may have been in this.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I bang on a bit about that theoretical framework, because if we can place our work in a theoretical umbrella, then we can make those I always can't say that word very well, Hannah, but that attribution becomes a more an easier argument to make. And Anna.
Yeah, just touching on what Catherine said, and she's right around that engagement process. And so as a NACAP measure of NACAP service, there is the way we measure information only, which is very short, succinct, you know, a very short connection with those people that contact us and the information we provide. And then, of course, advocacy could be, you know, a couple of contacts, or it could go on for a while. So it's around being able to measure the outcome is, are they better understood? Are they better informed? Are they more confident in being able to, you know, self-advocate if they need to? But it's that level of knowledge and confidence in the system, which is really important. So there's a whole, like, you know, there's a lot of nuances. Yes, there's a lot of tiers. But that's where I think from a NACAP, I really think rather than just advocacy, we also need to look at the information that we provide as well.
And Anna, when you think about the minimum data set in what you've just said, because I think that's something that we're so lucky to have across OPAN, and you know, real engagement I can see with that minimum data set. But do you have any reflection on how well some of those subtleties can be measured inside a minimum data set for a project, for when you're delivering specific projects?
Yes, I was involved in the MDS work group, and I'm just pleased that we've got a national process, like a consistent way that we're capturing data, but as each different SDO will be capturing other information relevant to their own. But I do think we can measure against the current MDS, but, you know, we can go on forever about, you know, more and more data. And what we don't want is to deflect our service and be all about data, because I can already hear advocates saying there's a lot of information we're providing. So I think we're at a good position for us to have enough. But when we start talking outcomes, that is very much a case management model. We're looking at outcomes in terms of what has been the impact of that, of our service to that client. And sometimes, as we know, if we're not, we may not be dealing with the older person, but, you know, a family member or someone else. So it is around what do we want, you know, we start back with what's the purpose of the NACAP? What is the purpose of NACAP? What are the objectives we're wanting to achieve? And that's what we should be measuring against.
Fantastic. And hopefully this process of this thinking through at an early stage with the projects will help to refine that at a very project level as well, Anna. But yes, thank you. Does anyone have any comments about sort of, I guess, the nuances of measuring short, medium and long-term outcomes for these types of projects within your work? That's good. Okay, well, thanks so much, guys. That was very helpful and interesting. And any other comments that you'd like to make about, before I move this slide off, about how, I guess, the bread and butter project were I guess, reaching high for the ultimate goals of that project, and anything that you'd like to reflect on in terms of the work that you're doing, and I guess the NACAP program overall? Otherwise, we'll just move down. Okay. Oh, we've hit questions and answers. So I just wanted to pause here, and as we've already actually dived into our Q&A, so that's great. Anything else that anyone would like to raise? All right. So we do have a little bit of extra time. So we've got another sort of 10 minutes, and I was keen to talk about defining impact and then starting to define what outcomes and outputs are. So if you guys are happy for me to move into that phase. Karen's nodding excellent. So I was hoping we would have time to do this. Okay, so if we go backward, this is the overall, this is when we're talking about logic models. Often we are trying to get to this point of really defining a large impact, and we call it, you know, the big, hairy, audacious goals of an impact or an ultimate goal. So I just wanted to just pause and note what I actually mean by that. So this is really, what is the program wanting to see in the world? So what are the really big, audacious goals that the program wants to see? What does the program want to be known for achieving overall? So that I just wanted to pause and say that. So I think it's a tension between, I think the important reason to do this is because there will be a tension between delivering the service, measuring, finding things that are measurable, but also contextualizing what we're doing in the context of a big, impactful, achievable vision. So that's where this landed in terms of what Bread and Butter were trying to do. That was their big hairy goals, I guess, is to give you that context. And then the other thing that I really wanted to pause, because I find that people we all get tripped up on define, and I will go back, and I just want to go back and show you this before I define it. Sorry. Is the difference between outputs and outcomes can sometimes become a little bit furry when we're, sorry, I'm talking about hairy and furry. I don't know why I'm going down that lane today. So when we're putting these things together, I think that's always a good thing for us to, and I still have to stop and think, what is the difference between an output and an outcome? And again, that's really important when we're trying to think about our measures when we get to that phase of the cycle as well. So sorry, I'll just quickly go back. All right, so I was being way too nifty with my animations here. So I think the best way to explain this is just explaining or showing some differences. So an output might be a number of volunteers placed into rural schools if we're looking at, say, ethics, delivering ethics training in schools. And then an outcome would be the educational improvement of the children in those schools. And an output might be the number of people accessing a service or a daycare service for mental health, and the outcome would be improvements in the health and well-being of those accessing the service. And then similarly, an output might be a number of people placed into employment, compared to an outcome which would be, excuse me, increased self-esteem for people who gain that employment. So just so you can, when we're working through this for at a granular project level, that's the sort of stuff that we want to keep in the front of our minds. Any questions, or does that make sense? Yes. Ree, how does that land for you?
Hello there.
Hi.
I'm Ree Alley, and I'm one of the new community development officers.
Lovely to meet you.
It's more of an observation, really. So from a community development point of view, if I'm thinking about the impacts that you were referred to, from the community development point of view, if you do your job well, you kind of do yourself out of a job, because what we're trying to do is raise the profile, raise the awareness of certain organizations. And once you've done your job, you move out, or once you've built the capacity of whoever it is, you move away. So in theory, we kind of don't want to do ourselves out of a job, but there is a job to do. But that's more of an observation, really. And then you have to move out and then go on to the next one and the next. Hence, we always have this thing about sharing community development offices around organizations, because we always move one from one to the other. But yeah, that was just an observation.
So a good outcome is no need for your officers. Yes, I see what you're saying, and I think that links to what Catherine was saying before as well. That if you have a good advocacy outcome, it could be that you're not needed for the next problem because that person can able to self advocate. Would that be fair to say, Ree? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's so great to have those insights from other sectors, like have people like yourself kind of moving between spaces, because there's lots to learn from your other work as well. Thank you. And Craig and Michelle. Craig, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is really great, because it has been, people have asked me in the past, so what would you have to do to do yourself out of a job? So OPAN or NACAP or advocacy is not needed, and that would be great to get to that point, and that would be nirvana and success. In the interim, we've still got other outcome measures of increased awareness by those networks that we're building, them referring people to our self-advocacy toolkits, utilisation of the self-advocacy toolkit. Now, that utilisation might be part of the output measure, but more people reporting that they feel confident in dealing with the aged care system and dealing with providers would be an absolute, that would be our BHAG achieved, I think, if no one needed us anymore at all.
And Michelle, would love to hear from you as well. Thank you, Craig. That's a very good point.
Hello, so I'm Michelle from Atticus, down here in our Damphine capital, the land of the Ngunnawal people. My question's just been answered. I think when I've done this kind of work outside of where I am now in the commercial world, it is basically trying to do yourself out of a job each time is the greatest outcome in the world. There'll always be another job, there'll always be something else to do and somebody else to help. So yeah, it's that plan, act, review, and it's a continual cycle. And what I've always found is you end up going back in the cycle again and just improving what you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other comments on that? I think the great thing about having these conversations, doing the workshops that we're planning to do, developing the logic models, and then going from there with really pinning down our measures, is that we're forced to think creatively about our measurement as well. So what's in the minimum data set, but then what else do we need to actually be looking at or including, so we might be looking at downloads of a toolkit, but we might also be able to think about time spent on that website post-download, or there'll be some clever ways that we can actually show engagement that are taking the funders, or even the Craigs in the execs on the journey to show success or integration of the program. Anna.
Sorry, just another thing, Craig, but also to be able to measure the impact of investing in the additional outlets that where that the government's invested in across Australia. There is that because I think that's really important. It's an investment. We need to know what has been the impact. It's not just about an increase in number of people accessing our services, but what has actually been the measure, how are we measuring it, sorry, what has been the impact. So I'm just throwing that in there because I'd love to, even with us, we're establishing we've got 2 outlets at the moment, but we actually haven't started the second one yet because I'm still establishing the one and I want to get the learnings from that to be able to then open up the other one. But what is from a community aspect is what has been the impact of an outlet, of a presence being in a local region. And the other thing around community development, it's your assets-based community development. Love that model. It is about your assets are the people in the community, your services in the community. All we're doing is facilitating it and then let them run with it. So our role is to really give them the confidence and to support them in facilitating their own community needs, whatever they are. You've got your networks in the region, they're spreading the news about what can be done. So it's also measuring that. But I love the ABCD model. That's your assets. Thank you.
And Hannah, will jump to you. And I just also wanted to raise, Anna, the model that Rianne's team is exploring for the advocacy development network around a community of practice as well, and actually measuring that and showing engagement and how successful that type of an approach is for the learning that you're interested in as well. Hannah, just handing to you.
Yeah, thank you. So just wanted to highlight also I think what would be really great is also that if you just look at the measures and the outcomes and whether they're positive or negative or more or lower than what you expected for those measures, is then just maybe using that to reflect what is it that actually enabled this change, or what was the barrier, why do we see lower achievement than we were hoping, and then just kind of learning about what the enablers were for this, what made the change happen, and be able to also articulate that and learn, what we need to do more of, less of, different. If some of those like reflections could be built into the process as well, I think would be really valuable for everyone.
Thank you, Hannah, and it points to that need that we said about good evaluation, which includes everyone early and people actually doing the work as well as the evaluators themselves. And Naomi, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, so just on that, I think as well, one thing that works well and would like to see continue is that consistent approach. So making sure that what we are collecting is consistent across the board, because the data can be really valuable, but it's got to be consistently collected in the same manner.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant point, Naomi. And again, why it's so good to have these kind of conversations and to be planning it with everybody involved, so that there is sharing of preferences as well, or best standards for measures that everyone can take forward. And also, I think there's also such a value in people engaging with the idea of the data collection, so that it actually is seen as valuable, not just an imposition, because we all know that feeling when we're doing work and thinking, why am I collecting this data? And to have that context for the whole team, I think, is incredibly valuable. And I should have said that about presenting findings as well. I think that's why it's so important to think about how you're going to present the findings and make sure that the team are seeing those findings incrementally as well. Okay, any other comments or questions or clarifications? I've forgotten what my next slide is, so I'm just going to see what that is in case it's... Oh, okay. I just wanted to show you, sorry, while you're all thinking if there's any other questions, for those who are joining me in the workshops for the development of the logic models for the 4 expansion projects, I just wanted to give you an idea of how we go about actually defining outcomes and outputs. And it's very much brainstorming. It's using, if we were in the same room, we'd be using Post-it notes, and we'd be starting to work back from what we were trying to, what our impact was, to the short, medium and longer term outcomes, to really make sure that we're we're thinking through all of these issues. And then once we get that down, then we start to work on the measures. And I'm so lucky, I know that Devon can't join us today, but we're so lucky that Devon Indig, who's been working with you guys on the minimum data set, will be advising on the measures phase of this as well. So she'll be able to bring that really intricate understanding of the I always say NDS, but the MDS as well. So we don't want to get those two things mixed up. And sorry, all right, I might just stop sharing there. I think that's probably a good point to finish. And I'll just let everyone, in case there's more, I'm just going to check the chat. Sorry, I've missed. Oh, I saw it. I'm sorry if I've missed some things into the chat. Oh, nothing too urgent. Okay, no worries, Michelle. Karen, are you happy for us to pause there and let everyone grab their next something to eat before their next meetings? I'm sure you've all got other things to go into at noon. And Craig and Karen,
I'm going to hand over to Craig to.
Great. Thank you.
Look, I just want to say a few things to close out today. Alison, thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. I learned a lot. I think everyone would have learned a lot. Just reflecting on this of the journey of NACAP and where we've come from as a network and as organisations that have been doing this and actually delivering amazing value to older people and their families, representatives over nearly 30 years. But this was about also us coming together as a network to try and build consistency around how we do that, to be able to demonstrate the value of what advocacy does. And I reflect on the recommendation of the Royal Commission, Recommendation 106, also contained, yes, put more funding into advocacy, yes, do more, but also make sure that what you're doing is valuable, consistent, and there's improvements in data as well. And I think about Stephen Covey, and he talks about the 7 habits of highly effective people. And one of those is start with the end in mind. So this is about starting with the end in mind. We've been going, but now in our journey of expanding the aged care advocacy program, this is about putting the frameworks in place so that we can measure, demonstrate what we're doing and the absolute value that brings and the difference that makes in older people's lives. Some of that is then also us contributing to the reform in the aged care system. And I think that every interaction that an advocate has with an older person or a family member starts to contribute to that. This is one part of that, is the evaluation frameworks. Another part is the MDS. As someone was saying about the consistent, I think Naomi, about the consistency in our data and the quality in our data. This helps set things up for the future. The data governance framework, which is coming shortly, will also put this overarching thing that we can demonstrate that what we're doing is implementing Recommendation 106 and bring credibility to what we're saying in the system. A lot of money has been put into advocacy in growth, and that's great. We know it's needed. But with that comes responsibility to demonstrate that we're delivering this efficiently and we're delivering this effectively. And Alison, thank you. You're helping us set that up and frame that, in particular with 4 key projects, but there's going to be so many other learnings around this to the rest of NACAP and everything we do and the value that every advocate brings to our sector, and that it's going to bring differences and better outcomes for older people. So thank you.
Thank you, Craig. And I just wanted to say that as I was writing this presentation over the weekend, I was putting those 7 or 9 principles of good evaluation, and I was thinking, OPAN's, this work is pretty much the only time I've worked on it that we're actually doing it in the right order. So you guys, it's a credit to you guys to investing in actually doing this. It's usually that we're saying that's a good approach, but we're having to work outside that good approach. So I think it's a real credit to you guys to be engaging with this so early. So thank you for including me. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
And we will share this via Helen and the Learning LMS as well. So it's on its way. Thanks, everybody. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.